Miriam answered the phone with her heart racing. She was certain that finally she would hear the details of her son's wedding, the official date, the invitation she had been waiting for months. But her daughter-in-law's voice came sharp and cold. "We already got married last weekend. It was intimate, just for special people." Miriam's world froze, the words burning in her ears. Special people. The black mother who had supported her son and his bride for 3 years was not one of them. The brand new dress she had bought for the big day was still hanging in the closet. The gift, still wrapped, sat on top of the dresser, all of it. Useless. The car payment she had been covering still drained from her account. The groceries she left at their door were still fresh in her memory. But at the altar, there was no place for her. Miriam tried to ask something, anything, but her tongue felt heavy. The daughter-in-law spoke 2 more sentences, short, bureaucratic, and hung up. The silence grew larger than the kitchen itself. In that moment, Miriam's heart sank. She felt not only the sting of exclusion, but the weight of something even more cruel, realizing that to them, she had never been more than a resource. She just didn't know that this pain would be only the first blow of many, because what already seemed like the worst humiliation was nothing compared to what was yet to come. Miriam was 71, a retired literature teacher, but she had never left books behind. In the neighborhood, everyone knew her for organizing community gatherings and encouraging young black voices to write. She believed every boy and every girl carried a story worth telling. That's why she set up meetings in parks, in the library, even in tiny borrowed rooms. All it took was paper, a pen, and the courage to speak. "Your voice matters," she would repeat. But above all, Miriam was a mother. She raised her son alone after losing her husband, a firefighter who died in the line of duty. She worked hard and saved every penny of the pension. She never thought of herself. Everything was for her son, believing she was building not only a financial future for him, but also a legacy of dignity. Her own little dreams stayed tucked away. Traveling, publishing a memoir, maybe fixing up the porch to welcome friends. She always put them off. First came her son, David. First came her daughter-in-law, Olivia. First came the family, and her greatest dream was simple, to see her son build a life with respect, happiness, and love. To watch her sacrifice someday turn into pride, her son at the altar, with her standing by his side. To know he would be okay was what warmed her heart. What she didn't know was that it would be within this very dream of a mother that her deepest wound would be born. The next morning, Miriam was caught off guard by a neighbor who showed up at her door, brimming with excitement. "Look, Miriam, the photos from David's wedding are everywhere. It was beautiful." The word wedding hit like a punch. With trembling hands, Miriam held the phone the neighbor handed her, and there it was, Olivia dressed in white, as if she had been born to be celebrated. The dress Miriam had helped pay for, a proud smile, surrounded by her parents, siblings, and cousins. All of them dressed elegantly, toasting with champagne, wrapping the couple in embraces. David stood beside her, smiling, posing for the picture. The same son Miriam had carried in her arms, raised alone after her husband's death, now celebrating life without even remembering the woman who had given him everything. She searched the photos for any sign she had been remembered. Maybe a chair reserved for her, a glance toward the back of the room, a small gesture that whispered, "My mother is here, even if she's not in the picture." But there was nothing. Where her place should have been, there were only unfamiliar faces. People who had never paid a bill, never wiped away one of his tears, never shared the weight of a night without food. Looking at those images, Miriam felt a cruel mixture. Shame, pain, and anger. Shame for believing she would be included. Pain for realizing she had been erased. Anger for knowing it hadn't been accident or oversight. It was a choice. The exclusion hadn't been neglect. It had been deliberate. And inside Miriam, something had shattered. The silence she had always carried like armor was about to crack wide open. A few days went by, and Miriam still carried in her chest the open wound left by those wedding photos. She even avoided opening social media, just so she wouldn't be reminded that she'd been shut out of the moment she had waited for the most. Then the phone rang again. David's name lit up on the screen. For a second, her heart sped up. Maybe this was the apology. Maybe her son had finally found the courage to explain. But it wasn't David's voice. It was Olivia's. The car broke down, Miriam. We need you to help. Her tone was firm, almost commanding, like someone speaking to a bank, not to a mother. Miriam gripped the phone tightly in her hands. Her chest burned, her mind filled with the fresh memories. The dress still hanging in the closet, the gift still wrapped on the dresser, the photos where everyone was present, except her. She took a deep breath, and for the first time in years, she didn't answer with submission. I only help those who consider me part of the family. On the other end, silence. Not the silence of a bad connection, but of embarrassment, of shock, of someone who hadn't expected resistance. Olivia cleared her throat, but found no words. David, in the background, muttered something Miriam couldn't make out. Neither of them dared to argue. Her words hung in the air like a sentence. Miriam slowly hung up, her hands still trembling. She felt a bitter pang of victory. Not because she had won a fight, but because, finally, she had drawn a line, and she had no idea that this no would only be the first of many, and that each refusal would bring with it a new battle. That night, Miriam couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned, hearing in her head again and again her daughter-in-law's words, just for special people. Each repetition hurt as if it were the very first time. In the middle of the night, she rose slowly, switched on the small lamp, and opened the closet. At the back, there was an old wooden box worn with time. For years, she had kept inside it receipts, papers, records, fragments of her own story. She spread them all across the bed. Rent receipts paid in her son's name, grocery bills, each one with enough to fill their pantry for an entire month. Proof of loans she had paid off herself, so David and Olivia wouldn't lose the apartment. Even travel tickets she had bought, so the couple could enjoy vacations she herself had never taken. Miriam did the math in silence, scribbling with a blue pen almost out of ink. When she finished, the number stared back at her like a punch. The total reached $37,000. Money from a lifetime of savings. Money that could have given her peace, travel, medical care, time to rest. But no, every dollar had been handed over without asking for anything in return, except for one thing, simple, almost ordinary, respect, and that was precisely the one thing she had never received. Staring at the pile of papers on the bed, Miriam felt her heart sink like a stone. She asked out loud, "What's left of me after giving so much?" There was no answer, only the silence of the house and the muffled sound of her own tears. And there, among yellowed papers and bitter memories, Miriam realized the cost of all she had given went far beyond money. It was also the cost of love never returned, and that negative balance would come to charge her an even greater price. It was a pale afternoon. Miriam came back from the market carrying 2 heavy bags, slowly climbing the steps of her porch. But when she opened the door, she froze in shock. Sitting in her living room, comfortably as if they owned the place, were David, Olivia, and her parents. None of them had been invited. "What is the meaning of this?" Miriam asked, setting the bags down on the floor. Olivia stood up with a tense smile. Miriam, we're worried. You've been confused, not answering calls, ignoring messages. We need to talk about your mental health. Miriam frowned. Before she could respond, Olivia's mother spoke up, her tone dripping with disdain. With all due respect, it doesn't seem safe for someone your age, and your kind, to handle things alone. The words dropped like stones. Your kind, it wasn't just about age. It was about color, about class, about who she was and where she came from. Miriam drew a deep breath, forcing her voice to stay steady. My kind is the kind that raised a son alone, paid every bill, kept supporting even those who didn't deserve it. My kind knows very well how to take care of what's hers. Her mother-in-law scoffed with contempt. See, she's even aggressive now. That's exactly what we mean, David. Your mother needs professional help. Miriam turned her face toward her son, waiting for a reaction. A gesture, a word, anything. But David only lowered his eyes, and that silence cut deeper than any sentence spoken. Olivia gripped his arm, adding, We only want what's best for you, Miriam. Maybe it's time to accept you can't handle everything on your own anymore. Miriam felt her legs tremble. The house that had always been her refuge now felt like a courtroom, and the verdict had been written long before she ever had the chance to defend herself. After everyone left, Miriam sat alone in the living room for hours, trying to digest what had just happened. Only then did she understand the real reason she hadn't been invited to her own son's wedding. It was racism. They didn't want her in the photos. She cried in silence, for the truth she had uncovered, for the sting of the words she had heard, and for the certainty that if she didn't fight back, she would lose everything. Not just her money, but her dignity. By sunrise, Miriam had already made her decision. She went to the bank and cancelled the automatic transfers that, month after month, drained her savings to sustain David and Olivia. She felt her body grow lighter as she signed the papers. Back at home, she called a locksmith and changed every lock. She wanted every door, every window to remind them that this house was hers. No one would walk in again without permission. She also paid to have security cameras installed. It wasn't paranoia, it was protection from people who had already proven they had no limits. The following week, during a break at one of the volunteer reading classes she still gave at the community center, she shared part of her situation with the director. Her voice broke as she spoke, and she received a firm embrace in return. Miriam, you're not alone. Many of us have faced the same kind of humiliation. We'll stand with you. And little by little she began to find strength in unexpected places. Neighbors who had felt the sting of contempt, friends who knew what it meant to be made invisible because of color or age. In every conversation, Miriam reclaimed a piece of herself. Resistance didn't begin with one grand gesture. It was born out of these small but steady steps. Canceling, locking, protecting, sharing, gestures that together marked a turning point. And though she didn't yet know what lay ahead, Miriam understood one thing. The fight had already begun, and there was no turning back. Life was slowly settling into a new rhythm. Miriam breathed more easily now that she had locked her doors and secured her home. But the enemy would not give up so easily. That afternoon, the doorbell rang. Miriam peered through the peephole and saw a woman holding a folder, a badge hanging around her neck, and a rehearsed smile on her face. Good afternoon, I'm from social services. We've received reports that you've been isolated, paranoid, at risk. The words cut like knives. Miriam understood instantly. These weren't reports. They were traps. Olivia and her family had taken the next step, turning her clarity into madness, her independence into weakness. Who said that? Miriam asked firmly. We've had statements from concerned family members. We need to evaluate your ability to care for yourself." Her blood boiled. "Evaluate my ability. Come into my home, meddle in my life based on lies." The social worker cleared her throat, keeping her voice cold. "We don't want any trouble, ma'am. We just need to verify that you're safe." Miriam drew in a long breath, controlled her anger, and gave the answer that would change everything. "Nothing will be verified without my lawyer present." She picked up the phone and dialed Weber, the only one who knew the whole story. While she waited, the woman shifted uncomfortably, flipping through the papers in her folder as if searching for arguments. Exactly 17 minutes later, Weber walked through the door with firm steps. He adjusted his glasses and stared straight at the social worker. "Show me the court order," he said flatly. The woman hesitated, tried to object, but Weber's confidence unraveled her stance. "If there is no court order, this conversation ends here. My client will not be intimidated by unfounded accusations." The social worker tried once more. "We don't have an order, but there are serious reports. The family is concerned about her safety." Weber gave a short, ironic smile. "Concerned? The same family that tried to force her into signing over power of attorney? The same family that trespassed into her home and spread lies about her health? That's not concern. That's abuse." The woman squirmed in her chair. "Sir, I'm just doing my job. I received the complaint and I need to record the visit." Miriam lifted her chin, her voice firm. "Then record the truth. That I pay my bills, that I cook my meals, that I read, that I teach. Record that I don't need guardians, least of all from those who want my inheritance while I'm still alive." The silence thickened. Weber seized the moment. "If this kind of harassment continues, we'll press charges not only against those who made the false report, but also against those who act on it without evidence. My client is not on trial, but if you want, we can take this to a judge, and I guarantee it won't end well for you." The social worker's face flushed red. She quickly gathered her papers and stood. "I'll return with more information, then bring lawyers. Because you're going to need them." Weber replied, never breaking eye contact. The door closed. Miriam's heart was pounding, but now it wasn't from fear. It was from fury and courage. She knew the attack wasn't over, but the game had just changed. In that moment she realized she was standing on a battlefield. And with Weber by her side, she would no longer fight alone. After the clash with the social worker, Miriam understood that the truth needed to be documented. Words spoken in her defense would not be enough. She needed living, irrefutable proof. The director of the community center was the first to step in with help. She brought a folder full of records, photos of Miriam leading reading circles, attendance sheets from workshops, reports signed with recent dates. Every document showed that she was still active, lucid, and above all, present in the lives of so many young people. 2 former students also mobilized. They recorded videos on their phones. One boy, shy-eyed, started hesitantly, but soon his emotion spilled over. The first, Jamal, a young black man with a trembling voice, stared into the camera, his eyes brimming with tears. "I was going to drop out of school. I thought my life had no value. Mrs. Miriam invited me to write. She told me my story deserved to be told. I wrote. And that day, for the first time, I felt like somebody. She's not sick. She heals. She saved my life." The second Darius took a deep breath before starting, but his voice came out steady, heavy with emotion. "My mom works 2 housekeeping jobs. I'd never spoken in public. At the open mic, I was shaking so much I almost gave up. Mrs. Miriam held my hand and said, 'Go, because your voice matters.' I went. And now I'm studying literature." "That was 3 weeks ago." If they call that mental confusion, then I want more people in the world just as confused. The videos spread among neighbors and friends, moving everyone who watched. They weren't technical defenses. They were confessions of transformation. Proof no courtroom could ignore. This woman wasn't just capable, she was transformative. At the pharmacy, Mr. Green signed a simple statement without hesitation. Miriam never purchased controlled medication, only vitamins and over-the-counter painkillers. They're inventing an illness that never existed, he said, stamping the paper with force. Small voices, small papers, small records. Together they gained weight. They became the beginnings of a wall against the lies. Miriam organized everything in a blue folder. Each page was like a brick of hope. But as she closed the cover, she felt its contradictory weight. The law might be on her side, but the defendant in this battle was her own son, and nothing hurt more than fighting against the very blood she had brought into the world. The morning of the trial dawned heavy. Miriam put on a simple black suit, spotless and neat. In the mirror she saw tired eyes, marked by sleepless nights, but also a new glimmer, the glimmer of dignity no one could take from her. The courtroom was full. David avoided looking at his mother. Olivia, on the other hand, seemed ready for a show. In a sober dress and carefully applied makeup, she wore the face of someone who had rehearsed every tear. The judge called for silence as Olivia was summoned. She walked slowly, like an actress stepping onto a stage, a white handkerchief in her hands, her face shining with tears already welling up. She sat before the judge and let out a heavy sigh. Her voice came out trembling, but loud enough for everyone to hear. Miriam was always like a mother to me. I loved her, I cared for her. But lately, she's lost her mind. She isolated herself, grew aggressive. We just want to help her. We just want her to be safe. Olivia covered her face with the handkerchief, sobbing. Some in the audience exchanged looks of pity. It was a convincing performance, until Weber stood up. With each step, the sound of his shoes echoed across the marble floor, cutting through the act. He stopped in front of her, his voice firm as steel. "Mrs. Olivia, allow me one question." She lifted her tear-filled eyes, trying to look fragile. "Yes, were you the one who told Miriam, when she asked about the wedding, that only special people had been invited?" The handkerchief froze in mid-air. Olivia blinked quickly. I was nervous. It was an unfortunate phrase, misinterpreted. Weber did not back away. He stepped closer, staring straight into her eyes. "Misinterpreted," he repeated slowly. "Then tell us, what is the correct context for excluding a black mother from her own son's wedding? Explain it to this court." The room turned cold. Olivia tried to smile, but the smile died on her lips. I didn't mean it that way." Weber raised his voice, letting every word strike the air. "Say it clearly, Mrs. Olivia. Say it for everyone here. In what situation is a mother who supported the couple for 3 years not special enough to see her son at the altar?" Olivia shrank in her chair. The tears dried. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Weber turned to the judge. "She won't answer, because there is no answer that justifies the cruelty of what she said. Today's show is not concern. It's racism disguised as care. Exclusion painted as protection." The final blow came as he faced Olivia once more. "Mrs. Olivia, you cried, claiming Miriam was always like a mother to you. A mother? Would you do this to your own mother? Tell her to her face she wasn't special? Or is it easier to destroy when that mother is black?" A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Olivia's face went pale. There were no more tears, no more words, no escape. The theater crumbled before everyone's eyes. Miriam closed her eyes and drew in a long breath. Her whole body trembled, but not from shame, from relief. What had once been whispered behind closed doors was now laid bare under the harsh light of justice, and in that moment every gaze fixed on Olivia no longer saw a victim, but a liar exposed. The courtroom hung suspended, as if the air had caught in everyone's lungs. The judge adjusted his glasses, glanced at the papers before him, and instead of announcing the sentence, he lifted his eyes toward Miriam. "Do you wish to say anything before I deliver my verdict?" Her heart raced. Her legs trembled, but Miriam stood. The entire room followed her movement, as if waiting for her final word. Her voice came out strained but clear. "There is no pride in what I'm about to say. My soul aches to admit it. They say I lost my mind because I cut off the financial help. The truth is, I stopped because I finally understood my place. I was excluded from my own son's wedding, and yet they still expected me to keep paying the bills. That is not madness, it is dignity. If I am not worthy of being part of the family, then I will not be treated as an open vault." The words lingered in the air, heavy, holding everyone in stillness. Even the judge kept his eyes fixed on her for a few seconds before speaking. It is clear to this court that there is no basis for guardianship. The evidence confirms Miriam is fully in possession of her capacities. What this process reveals is not incapacity, but abuse disguised as care. The petition is denied. A murmur rippled through the room. Weber closed his folder firmly, as if sealing a victory. Olivia sat frozen, this time with no tears. David, crushed by his own silence, could not find the courage to lift his eyes. Miriam drew in a deep breath, and as she stepped out of the courtroom, she allowed the tears to flow. They were not tears of defeat. Each drop washed away years of pain, making room for something she had not felt in a very long time, a new beginning. Months passed since the trial. Miriam walked lighter now, as if finally breathing the air of her own freedom. The bills were in order. The house was quiet, but now it was a chosen silence. She devoted herself to the literary journey she had always postponed and to the reading classes for children at the community center. Watching little ones discover the magic of words gave back something she thought she had lost, the simple joy of being useful without being exploited. Even so, her heart carried a shadow. Sometimes, when she saw young people walking arm in arm with their parents, she felt a pang. She did not seek David out. She respected the distance. She had learned that love cannot be begged for. One rainy afternoon, the unexpected happened. Someone knocked at her door. When she opened it, she found her son standing there, hunched, his eyes red from sleepless nights. His voice came out broken. "Mom, I woke up too late. I let them turn me against you. I let racism speak louder. Forgive me." Miriam felt the world spin. For an instant, she saw again the little boy who once ran into her arms clutching his school notebooks. The tears came but quietly. They slid down her face as she embraced him. "I forgive you, my son, but I will never again allow my love to be used against me." He wept on her shoulder, heavy with regret. Then he stepped back. He didn't ask to stay. He didn't feel he had the right. He never moved back in with her, and that was good, because forgiveness was real. But so was the lesson. Miriam knew reconciliation didn't mean a return to the past, but the chance for a different future, one where she finally lived the way she had always deserved. David left his mother's house with his heart in pieces. He knew that an apology was not enough, and he carried a weight that tears alone could not wash away. It was the weight of words left unsaid and choices that had nearly destroyed his mother. For days, guilt followed him like a shadow, and in the midst of that burden, he remembered the gift he had inherited from her, a love for words. He picked up a notebook and began to write. At first, scattered scribbles, then full pages. He wrote about his happy childhood, about the shame he had allowed others to plant in his chest, about how he had closed his eyes to Olivia's racism and her family's. He wrote about the pain of realizing that, in the name of silence, he had wounded the very person who loved him most. When he finished, there it was, a book. He gave it a simple, direct, impossible-to-ignore title, The Mother I Denied. The work spread like wildfire. Readers wept as they recognized their own omissions in its pages. Teachers brought passages into classrooms. Groups of young people discussed the story in open circles. Men and women, reading David's confession, found courage to confront their own mistakes. Miriam received a copy from her son's hands. She read slowly, every word cutting and healing at the same time. When she closed the final page, she felt that her pain had been given a voice, and that this same voice could now keep countless other mothers from being silenced by prejudice. David had not rewritten the past, but he had written something greater, a living testimony of how racism destroys families and how truth can begin to rebuild them. This is not the story of just one woman. It is the voice of many Black mothers who were used, discarded, and silenced. It is also the memory of sons who lost themselves in prejudice and only later realized the size of what they had lost. Racism doesn't just destroy opportunities. It wounds the heart of the family. It builds walls where there should have been shelter. Miriam showed that dignity has no price, and David proved that owning the truth can transform even the deepest wounds. The pain doesn't disappear, but it can become strength. The emptiness doesn't vanish, but it can open a path for others to find freedom. And now I ask you, what if it were your mother? What if it were your family? What would you do? Having the courage to confront prejudice is always the first step. If this story touched you, leave your comment. I want to hear your voice. And don't forget to subscribe here. Every story is a cry against injustice and an invitation to transformation. Finally, share this video so more people can reflect on the weight of racism within the most intimate bonds. Because silence protects prejudice, but our voice has the power to break chains.